Where I humbly beg to differ from that, it's implication in India. The other day I was in Lucknow, one customer stood up to ask me the same question as I mentioned to you. It may have, you never know. So next speaker we have Professor Arun Mahanti. So he is a professor of Russian studies. Let's see his study and presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Mahapatra, Ambassador Shukla, Mr. Ganguly, and friends. Ambassador Shukla has touched upon all the points that needs to be touched on this topic. And he is the best man to speak on this subject for the simple reason. In recent years, in recent decades, I think he has spent the maximum number of years in this space, if I am not wrong. My calculation is right. You are, I think, 4 times.
Ronan Sen is my equal.
Yes,
yeah,
yes. But you had also 4 times.
3 assignments I've done.
1 in Kiev?
1 in Kiev.
So in that space?
Then it's 4, yeah.
Yes. No, but I would just like to re-emphasize certain points that Ambassador Shukla has made. Because when you read the Russian newspapers, you get one perspective. You read the Western media, you get absolutely different perspective, and the truth is somewhere in between. But nobody talks about the history as Ambassador Shukla has highlighted. Unless you understand this history, you can never understand why Russia has taken this step of reunification of Crimea into Russia. Not annexing, not invading or anything, reunification. So he has already mentioned that, the history of Russian state began, the written history of Russian state began in the year 10th century with Kiev as the capital. It was called Kievan Rus. And Kievan Rus was the largest country in Europe in the 10th, 11th centuries. Then this Kievan Rus broke into several principalities and came under the rule of Golden Herds, Tatar Mongols, for nearly 200 years. So in the 15th century, by the 15th century, this territory, Kievan Rus, it was split into different principalities, and some of the principalities came under the upcoming Lithuanian Empire, then Polish Empire, then of course Russian Empire. Then the latter stage in the 18th, 19th century, particularly the western part of Ukraine, it was part of Austro-Hungary. So the point I would like to make is, first of all, Ukraine is a very weak state construction. It is a fragile state construction. It has barely 20-25 years of statehood and 20 years only in the present borders. Second thing, it still suffers from a great deal of civilizational divide. Third thing, there are historical fault lines in this country. So it cannot be really a very viable country. It got its independence because of Soviet Union, the Bolshevik leadership. It got its separate status within the Soviet Union thanks to Stalin. Then it expanded its territory again thanks to Stalin. And in '54, Crimea became part of Ukraine. It was kind of arbitrary decision by Khrushchev at that point, and nobody was asked, no referendum, nothing, absolutely. So that's why Crimea, I don't think any Russian had ever reconciled to the fact that Crimea became part of Ukraine. I have visited Crimea, I have visited many parts of Ukraine, particularly in the east and south. The Russians would say this is injustice, absolute injustice. Crimea and Russians, I think no Russian has ever said with the fact that Crimea would always remain with a different country, part of different country. So this historical aspect is very, very important. So as I said, what is Ukraine? This is one ethnos. Russians, Ukrainians and Belarusians, they belong to one ethnos, which is Russia. So by 15th century, this ethnos was divided into three ethnos: Russians, Ukrainians and Belarusians. So in Russian, the Russians were called as Great Russians, Velika Rus, Great Russians. The people who lived in the western part and central part of present-day Ukraine, they were known as Mala Rus, Little Russians. And the people who lived further to the north, the present territory of Belarus, they were known as White Russians. So this is one ethnicity. You have to understand, for centuries, this was one ethnicity which got divided for historical reasons in the 15th and 16th century. Then of course, then the Russian Empire expanded. So if you look at the Ukrainian map, so this southern part and the eastern part, cities starting from Dnipropetrovsk up to Odessa, Kherson, Nikolaev, Lugansk, they were always part of Russian Empire. It was called New Russia or Novaya Russia. In Russian history, this part of the southern and eastern part was known as New Russia. And this city, Dnipropetrovsk, was known as Novorossiysk, New Russian city. So this was always part of Russian Empire for more than 300 years. But the western part, as I said, it was parts of different empires. Austro-Hungary, it was part of Polish Empire, it was part of Lithuanian Empire. So that's why there is a civilizational divide. The western part and to some extent the central part, it was with the west, with the Europe, whereas the eastern and the southern part, it was always with Russia. The language-wise, West Ukrainian language is different from Russian language, it's not the same. And religion, Catholicism is practiced in the western part, whereas Orthodox Christianity is practiced in the eastern and southern part. So that's why I say this civilizational, religious divide remains very deep in the society, always. And historical fault lines are there because Ukraine was never an independent state within the last 10 centuries. Only in 15th century, 16th century, as Ambassador Shukla said, there were Hetmans. So these Hetmans were ruling in a place called Zaporozhye. So they used to go to Russian Empire sometimes, they would go to the Lithuanian Empire or to the Polish Empire. They were not independent states. So they were virtually kind of protectorates of these empires from time to time. So that is the best time they had as a state. So, and then of course 18th century, 19th century, the Russian Empire expanded, and this in the year Crimea, which is the bone of contention right now, became part of Russian Empire in the year 1783. And the, when people talk about Crimea, they talk about even Russian history also. They call Sevastopol and Crimea. Although Sevastopol is a city inside Crimea, part of Crimea. But the history is so different of Sevastopol and Crimea. That's why in the history, they always write about Sevastopol and Crimea. Why? Sevastopol is almost like a sacred place. Crimea is a sacred place for Russians because Orthodox Christianity started spreading into Russian other parts of Russia from a place called Khersonas here in Crimea. So and then in the year 1853, there was a great Crimea War. So from the history, you must be knowing about that. But that was primarily for the reason of protecting the Orthodox Christians in Crimea. Russia had gone for that. But then it became a European war. The war began as the war between Russia and Turkish Empire, Ottoman Empire. But subsequently, France and Britain also joined the war with Ottoman Empire against Russia. So Russia was very badly defeated, but they did not surrender. So and this Sevastopol, it is the cradle of Russian Black Sea fleet. Catherine the Great had built the city as the Black Sea fleet, which was virtually meant for power projection of Russia into Middle East, Mediterranean, and to that part of it. So from the beginning, from 1783, Catherine II had made this city for projection of Russian power, which was one of the 5 big global powers at that point of time, for its power projection in the Mediterranean and in the Middle East. So, and in 1855, when the Russian army was defeated, it was really very shameful. Russians suffered a lot. They have never suffered emotionally so much after First World War or after Second World War, but after Crimea War, yes, emotionally they suffered a lot. And the admirals of Black Sea Fleet, they did not want to surrender their ships. they just sank those ships there. And the same thing happened also during First World War, Second World War. Hitler occupied the Sevastopol city because of the sacrifices of the local people. It was awarded the hero city of Soviet Union. So my point is, emotionally, historically, Russians are very, very closely attached to Crimea and particularly Sevastopol. So this is history. But after the Bolshevik Revolution, you know, the history book says Lenin was not very keen to have Ukraine as a separate republic. But Stalin was responsible for the national policy, and he floated this idea of national territories being kept in republics. So this is how Ukraine was built. And the Ukraine under Bolsheviks had never that extent of territory that Soviet Ukraine enjoyed under the communist rule. So this southern part and eastern part, which were always Russian, historically, emotionally, Russian-speaking people, 97%, then composition, it is very difficult to really make a differentiation between the Russians and the Ukrainians. So, actually, when I was a student, so we used to joke with the Russian and Ukrainian girls. What is the difference? The Ukrainian girls used to cook well. That could be seen. So and the Ukrainians, they eat sala. What is that?
Salo.
Salo. Yes. This is pork meat. Salo. And they drink vodka, which is known as Gorilka, which is also equivalent of vodka. So these were the only 2-3 differences between the Russians and Ukrainians. So unless you live there, you go to their families, you will never make, you can never understand who is Russian and who is Ukrainian. So the point I want to make is that historically, emotionally, civilizationally, so the southern part and eastern parts of Ukraine and the present day Russia, they were in the same space always. But Soviet Union was a big state, and these borders were administrative borders. So nobody revolted at that time. If this Odessa, Kherson, Nikolaev, the Kharkov, those cities or those territories go over to Ukraine, nobody really bothered at that point of time. And then these cities, of course, the Soviet government built huge industries in these areas, in the southern and eastern part. So I have visited the western part also. It was an alien body, organic body in the whole Ukraine state. So their language was different. And if you would drink Gorilka with them, they would also talk about the disloyalty to the Soviet government as well as to the central federal government in Kiev. So they never felt that they are part of Soviet Union or Ukraine. So again, I am making the same point that the civilizational divide was always there. Only thing because of this state repression, maybe they were not very open about talking about the differences. But otherwise, these cities called Ivano-Franko, Lubov, those cities there, people could barely speak Russian. They used to speak their own languages. So this, even during the Soviet period, this civilizational divide remained in Ukraine. So, but nevertheless, thanks to Bolsheviks, this Ukraine, mostly of this present-day territory, came under this state because of the Bolsheviks. This you have to understand. So the Ukraine in its present form, 90% of Ukraine in its present form, was a result of Bolshevik nationalist policy. Then second thing, Ambassador Shukla said, talked about Stalin and Hitler treaty, as a result of which, certain parts which are part of Polish Empire and earlier Hungary or Austro-Hungary, which is known as Western Ukraine, they became part of Ukraine. So this is how the Ukraine was. But during Soviet time also, the divide between the western part and eastern part was very clearly visible if you mingle with the people, if you mix with them, talk to them about the politics and all. So, but then in 1954, the third thing, so 1954 when Crimea was given to Ukraine, so that happened during the celebration of 300 years of union between Russians and Ukrainians. So in the year 1654, when we are talking about the Getmans, so these Getmans, they were either under the Polish influence, or under Lithuanian influence, or under Russian influence. So Bogdan Khmelnytsky, the famous Getman, he finally understood their pet lies with Russians, and he made a treaty, historical treaty, Yaroslavl Treaty, Pereslav Treaty in the year 1654, as a result of which Ukraine and Russia remained together ever since 1654. And 1954, when the country was not celebrating, the elite was celebrating 300 years of this union. So Khrushchev, who was an Ukrainian, he took a virtually arbitrary decision. At least no explanation has been ever given why Crimea was gifted to Ukraine. And then the Ukrainian, the Crimean people, who are by and large Russians. So composition says 60-70% Russians, 20-25% Ukrainians. But you talk to the Ukrainians, they speak Russian. They get married to Russians. Ukrainian, some write Ukrainian because one of the parents is either mother or the father is of Ukrainian origin. So if you look from this point of view, almost 90-95% people are Russians having allegiance to Russian state. So this is how continued. And after the Soviet breakup, so you have to remember what happened. So the Russians by and large reconciled to the fact that the country broke into 15 republics. But they never reconciled to the fact that Crimea became part of Ukraine. These people who have traveled to that country, discussed about domestic politics, even during Yeltsin's time, the elite even had not reconciled that Crimea has become part of Ukraine. Yeltsin, in one of his talks during a drinking session, said, "Kuda paidu to Ukrainians? Where would the Ukrainians go?" That means they would bring back Crimea to their fold sooner or later. Then, of course, one thing that happened in '91. So there were referendums which were used to justify the breakup or the independence of these 15 republics. Okay? But there was a referendum in Crimea too. And the Crimeans wanted their own republic. The first constitution in '92 was for an independent Crimea. But afterwards there was a lot of pressure on the Crimean local government. So finally in '94 they inserted one more clause, autonomous republic within Ukraine. But then Black Sea Fleet has gone to Ukraine. What to do with that? So even Yeltsin also realized it is a blunder, simply how to get Black Sea Fleet back. It's not possible. So he signed the '97 Friendship Treaty. There was a lot of discussion in the country, through the press, in the Duma. There was a pressure that the Friendship Treaty should be signed, as a result of which Russia would recognize the territorial integrity of Ukraine. And Black Sea Fleet would partially come back to Russia. So the mainstream argument was, if we do, we show some favor to Ukrainians, they are after all our brothers, so let us show some fraternal gesture to them. And when things settle down, perhaps Crimea would come back and the Black Sea Fleet would come back. But that didn't happen. So now comes the second stage of the game, the geopolitical game. So all leading American experts say Russia can never get back its great power status, global status, as long as Ukraine, Crimea are not with them. So let us do everything possible to tear away this geopolitical space from Russia. So the Americans worked on these lines. So finally they also used the mechanism techniques of colored revolution that they used in Yugoslavia, they used in Georgia, they used in Kyrgyzstan. So finally they used that in Ukraine also. In the year 2004, so what they did, Yanukovych had won the elections. This is a fact. In 2004, Yanukovych had won the elections. But they forced an option, as a result of which Yushchenko became the president. They had an illegal, unconstitutional third round, and the third round, as they say, the counting matters. So virtually a pro-US president was forcibly installed in Ukraine in the year 2005. So Yushchenko continued up to 2010. So during these years, this government, Ukrainian government, did everything possible to bring Ukraine to US orbit or Western orbit. They did everything possible. They tried to bring the NATO troops to Sevastopol, to Odessa, to Kherson. So there are many attempts to bring NATO closer to Russian borders through Ukrainian territory. There are really many attempts, but they didn't succeed. So finally, to 2010 elections, Yanukovych again becomes the president. So the tragedy, I don't know whether tragedy or not, but tragedy with all the presidents, elected presidents of Ukraine is they would win every election on a pro-Moscow platform, but do everything possible to take away Ukraine from Moscow's orbit. So you look at the past president, of course he was responsible for disintegration process, but the past elected president was Kuchma. He became president in 1994. After 5 years, 1999, again he became president. And you look at his election manifestos, he would say in the past, together with Moscow, European Union. Second, no, we would remain with Moscow. Moscow is our most important priority of our foreign policy. But then he also took certain steps which were detrimental to Moscow's strategic and security interest. Then, Yanukovych won the election in 2004, but could not become the president. So this Viktor Yushchenko, he did everything possible, just as a puppet, whatever the Washington said, he did that. So now the point that I want to make is, starting from 2000 onwards, after the Yeltsin years, Putin wants to have his own geopolitical project. He wants to reunite the former Soviet space, but not by force or by any means, but through economic means. So that is how he started, this customs union. He had this common economic space consisting of Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Russia. He had then now they are thinking of making this Eurasian economic union, which should kickstart from next year. So this is not a question of only economic integration, as President Putin says. Of course, it has some geopolitical content. So this should be Russia's own sphere of influence. Russia is trying for that. So that is the reason you can see its power projection, building of military industrial complex, all those things. So, but Russia was never thinking Crimea could be part of Russia anytime soon. So there is, of course, this is geopolitical game between Ukraine and Russia. But there are rules of the game, you have to play by the rules of the game. So Yanukovych, who won the election on a pro-Moscow platform, was hard-pressed, arm-twisted to follow US pro-Western policies. So he didn't know, of course, he promised to the Western leaders, to American leaders, that he would be in favor of integration with European Union. But then he would come to Putin and say, I'm also keen to be part of Eurasian Union, part of your integration project. So like that, but it was clearly, these are two different geopolitical projects. So we cannot, so for Ukraine it was a difficult game. Perhaps if it is economic integration project, so, and option is good. Ukraine can benefit both from Russian economic space, and from the European space. But the United States and European Union pushed Ukraine to the level and imposed a kind of option which is, either you are with us or against us, or you are with the Russians. So this option really played havoc with Ukrainian foreign policy, security and economic policy. So Yanukovych, he had promised that they would sign the association treaty with the European Union. But at the last moment, on 19th November, in Vilnius summit, he backed out. He backed out saying that this is being postponed. Not that this is a final decision, but we are postponing the signing because this is not the right time. And by then, Ukrainians have understood, by signing this association treaty with the European Union, they are not really gaining anything. if they join European Union, Russia closes its border with Ukraine. As a result, Ukraine would lose $15 billion every year in terms of economic and trade interests. That is one thing. Second thing, Russian gas. So if the border is there, if Ukraine is with European Union, so gas prices would be European prices, which is 450. And if Ukraine becomes part of Russian integration project, in that case they would get gas for $240 or so, almost 50%, 60%. So this economic logic was there behind Yanukovych's decision to postpone the signing of this association treaty with European. Nothing else. Because he had fear. But by that, Yanukovych is a very corrupt leader. There is no doubt. His money is there in European banks in America. So for that matter, no leader in Ukraine is honest. Starting from number one, past president, even Yulia Tymoshenko, about whom you hear so much, is known as gas queen. She has made hundreds of millions of dollars out of this gas business. So for that matter, Kuchma, Tymoshenko, Yushchenko, Yanukovych, all of them are corrupt leaders. There is no doubt. And two of Ukraine's prime ministers are sitting behind the bars in foreign countries. One is sitting in Israel, and the other one is sitting in United States. So
In jail.
no, United States jail. Yes. So you can imagine the level of corruption there. So, but when Americans say, so these people who are on the streets, they were against corruption. No, of course, people are fed up of corruption. But for that matter, every prime minister, every president of that country was neck deep in corruption. So that is not a solid ground. So, but when Yanukovych finally declined to sign this treaty, West was caught by surprise. So they started putting pressure, whatever the Russian sources say. They threatened him also. He will take you out of the country, put you behind the bar. Your assets would be frozen. There would be a threat to your family members and all that. So, but that didn't work. So finally, in February, in December, he signs one agreement with Russia, as a result of which Ukraine would get a lot of benefits economically. Trade facilities would be there, gas price would be halved by 50%. So this bailout package, Russia was willing to give $15 billion credit to Ukraine. So all this was good for Ukraine, there is no doubt. But then the West could not reconcile with the fact that Ukraine has gone over
Slipping out.
Slipping out over to Russian army. So their main purpose to tear away Ukraine from Russian space, geopolitical economic space. But that is not happening. So they started fomenting these mass demonstrations. I'm not telling you that everybody who was in the mass who was instigated to do that, because at its best there were 50,000 people. It's a huge demonstration, there is no doubt about that. But what are the slogans? Against corruption, for democracy. So, but the fact remains, the Assistant State Secretary Victoria Nuland said, America has spent $5 billion over the years for this purpose, to tear away Ukraine. And I don't know what is the size of US Embassy in Kyiv right now. I was told the US Embassy in Kyiv was one of the largest in the world. And there are press reports that United States was spending $20 million per week for sustaining the demonstrations on the streets. So President Putin is busy in his Olympic Games. He is very careful that should not be any negative reporting. So this was the best time. Russia was would be perhaps unable to react. Because you remember when the Georgian war started in 2008, Putin was in Beijing. So the almost same, I think so, because the choosing of the time must be thought of from this point of view. Putin cannot take any action if we do something wrong. Don't play by the rules. So this is what happened. So Yanukovych had adopted certain laws to keep the demonstrations peaceful, for use of power. So he was forced to take back those laws, and he did. Any normal state would have kept those laws. But anyway, under pressure, he annulled those other steps. Then finally, the emissaries of European countries were there. So they finally made an arrangement, signed an agreement in the presence of foreign ministers of Poland, German and France for a kind of peaceful treatment, that the 2004 constitution would be returned to the country. That means the country would have a presidential form of president, come parliamentary type of government. The early elections should be held, I think in May or whatever. But all the demands of the oppositions were made through this agreement. So what is the problem? If Yanukovych has considered all your demands, but suddenly he has also withdrawn the troops from the road, and suddenly no, he doesn't have control over his security forces, and at that point of time, the hundreds, maybe thousands of these ultra-nationalists who were trained, most of whom were trained in NATO facilities in Lithuania and Poland, they were acting on the streets. And the firing, in which also nearly 100 people died, now it seems it was the result of provocation by the then opposition. That means the people who have come to power now, they had provoked that, and the snipers really belonged to the opposition, to the present interim government. So they wanted to create a situation in which they would say, situation is out of control and the opposition can take power. That is what exactly they did. So you saw the pictures how presidential palace has been raided and golden toilets are there. As I think every president in CIS has a golden toilet. Now the calculation was like in 1919 when Ceausescu fled, they said his wife wears golden shoes, all those kind of stories. So that picture was in CIS space. Which president is not rich? Who doesn't live a very lavish life there? So, but this was for feeding the common people. And then, of course, this fellow had already withdrawn the security forces, and he was not controlling the security forces, and he just left Kyiv to attend some meeting in Kharkov. Then this coup took place. So these ultra-nationalists from the western part of Ukraine, they virtually took power. But I'll tell you the European approach to this also. Europeans, they have said that these ultra-nationalists, they oppose European values. European Parliament has also taken resolutions that the Svoboda Party, Freedom Party, which is the biggest party there right now, to which the Prime Minister belongs, their values, not the Prime Minister, the President belong, and some 7 to 8 members of these ultra-rightists are in the interim government, who are really, by their ideology, can be called as neo-Nazis or neo-fascists. Now they control the situation there in Kyiv. And Yanukovych, who seemed very strong in the beginning, so finally was, there was a threat to his life, according to Russian sources. Putin himself said that there was a threat to Yanukovych's life, and then he tried to Rostov in Russian territory. But some people say, Russia has instigated this thing, conspiracy theories. They have made this coup. As a result of that, they would say that this Yanukovych is also unfit for government, and